We are now 2 days away from Germany's next federal election. In this video, I want to give an overview of recent polling to see what we can expect from the election results on Sunday. Now, if we take a look at the polls, we can see that the CDU-CSU has maintained their position in first place and will most likely be the largest party in the Bundestag, forming the next government either with one or two coalition partners. This means that Friedrich Merz is pretty much guaranteed to be the next chancellor, according to the way polls are now. And of course, the CDU-CSU with 30% is clearly ahead of all the other parties, including the SPD, the party of the incumbent Chancellor Olaf Scholz. And so it is likely that the CDU-CSU will be in prime and sole position to form the next government, lead the next government. And of course, with their leader being Friedrich Merz, he will become most likely the country's next chancellor. Of course, the coalition talks will be somewhat difficult and might take a long time, but with these, according to polls, the CDU-CSU is really the only party in a position to lead the next German coalition government. The AfD is at around 20% in the polls and will be a very strong opposition party, but of course no other party has been open to working with the AfD, and so there is very unlikely for any coalition involving the AfD, so they will most likely go into the opposition, being the strongest opposition party, and being, with around 20% will be very strong in the Bundestag, have a lot of speaking time, have a lot of presence in the debates, in the various committees, and so they will form Germany's primary opposition party after these next elections. The SPD, the party of the incumbent Chancellor Olaf Scholz, will win around 15% of the vote, according to polls. This is a drastic defeat for the SPD. This is a 10-point drop from the last election. This will be the worst result for the SPD since the foundation of Germany's Federal Republic in 1949. This is a historic defeat for the Social Democrats if they get anywhere close to this. Even if the SPD gets, upwards of 19%, if they fall below 20%, this will be their worst result in the history of modern Germany. And nonetheless, it will be a major defeat for the party, and definitely a big defeat, because this has been one of Germany's main parties since the end of World War II. It's been one of the main parties that's dominated German politics. Olaf Scholz has been the fourth chancellor. Pretty much every governor and every chancellor, every leader of Germany, every president has been from either the CDU, CSU, or the SPD, with some exceptions to other parties. But for a party like this that's ruled German politics as one of the two major parties, to be in third place and below 20% is a huge development. The Greens are at around 13%. This is a small drop in support from what they got in the 2021 election, but of course not too much. This is, of course, moderate amount of support. I believe this will be their second best election result, and so the Greens are losing somewhat, but they are getting around 13%. This will be, of course, a moderate and okay, decent, result for them. Now, the interesting results from recent polls is we've seen a shift. DLinke has actually surged a lot, and the BSV has somewhat collapsed, falling below 5% in the polling aggregate. Now, there's a number of reasons for this. One, before, when the BSV and DLinke were one party, when they were together, there was a lot of infighting, there was a lot of division, and I believe because the BSV has split away from DLinke, initially there was a loss in support, but the party is more unified, it is more organized, and it might be appealing to more younger, more progressive voters in the cities now that it does have a more unified message. It has had a successful social media campaign through some of its leaders, and so that has allowed it to, to propel it to some momentum and success. Of course, these are only polls, so with all of these parties around 4 to 6, 7%, they do have to be careful. They're not guaranteed to be in. The DLinke was polling at around 6, 7% in the 2021 election, and they ended up falling below. So it is still possible for DLinke to fall below 5%. But according to polls, they have a very good shot at not only re-entering the Bundestag, but actually re-entering the Bundestag with more seats than they won in the 2021 election. And even a few weeks ago, this was kind of seen as unthinkable. DLinke was almost considered to be dead as a political party. Last year, there was lots of infighting since they lost, below 5% in the 2021 election, and after Sarah Wagenknecht and a number of notable politicians left the party, a lot of people expected DLinke to kind of falter here and cease to be a major player in German politics, especially after the East German state elections and even the EU elections, where they got around 2.5% nationwide. However, DLinke has made a major comeback in the polls and will likely be in the next Bundestag. And what's interesting is the fact that the BSV has had somewhat of the opposite turn of fortune. Now, the BSV has, of course, around 4.5% in the polls. It is still very possible for them to enter into the Bundestag. They got around 6% in the EU elections, and so it could be the case that they are underpolled. However, this is, of course, not a good sign for the party. This is not where they want to be, and if the BSV fails to enter representation in the Bundestag this time, it could be very likely that they lose footing and are not able to enter in the Bundestag later. They could lose their the voters, the momentum they have now, and it's very difficult for a party to come back. This goes for the FDP as well, which is around 4.2%, 4.3% in the polls. Now, of course, the FDP has been polling below 5% for a long time now, and so it was pretty much expected that the FDP would have a very hard time entering into the Bundestag. But we've seen a last-minute shift between DLinke and the BSV. Now, if we take a look at these results, most of this is in line with what polling has shown us for over a year now, with the CDU-CSU being the largest party, of course, the opposition party, so they're not kind of blamed for a lot of the crises and problems that are going on right now in Germany. And we see that the parties of the German government, the traffic light coalition parties, are all losing support. The SPD around 10 points, the Greens around 2, and the FDP around 6 points. Now, this will be very, very interesting, because if the FDP does not enter in the Bundestag, it will be very difficult for them to be able to regain footing, and it is possible that the FDP could cease to exist as a player in German politics, and that will be very significant, because the FDP has been in German politics as a major player since the beginning. They were always involved in coalitions since the end of the Second World War, coalitions with either the SPD, the CDU. They even had a president of the Federal Republic, and so for them to kind of cease to exist on the German federal politics will be a major development and a major change in the country. Even if DLinke or the BSV, one of these parties kind of falters, that would be very significant, because DLinke as a party and even Sarah Wagenknecht as a politician are well-known kind of household names in German politics, and for either of those to kind of go away from the scene will be a significant development. But of course, we have three parties that are all vying to get into the Bundestag. That is not 100% sure. As of now, I would say DLinke is most likely going to make that comeback happen. However, it's not guaranteed. Some polls still have them at around 5-6%. They could be overpolled. However, of course, this is definitely where they want to be, and it goes the same way for the BSV and the FDP. They could be underpolled. The FDP actually managed to get 5% at the EU elections, and so it could happen. That could happen again here. And so I would say for all three of these parties, it's still possible for them to fall below or get in the Bundestag. But I would say, bad signs for the BSV and very good signs for DLinke. And of course, with these numbers, we can expect, to be four very strong parties in the Bundestag. Of course, the CDU, the AfD, the SPD, and the Greens. And we actually had debates between the leading candidates of these four parties together. Of course, there's a debates between all of the parties together. But the Greens, the SPD, the AfD, and the CDU have all declared chancellor candidates and are all parties that are somewhat large, somewhat powerful in the polls, and they had a debate with their four candidates together. Now, if we take a look at the possible coalitions, of course, like I said, the AfD is the second largest party, expected to be the second largest party in this election. However, every other party has ruled out working with them. And so the two only probable outcomes are either a coalition between the CDU-CSU and the SPD, or the CDU-CSU and the Greens. Now, it is possible if DLinke, the BSV, and the FDP all manage to make it into the Bundestag, we could see that a two-party coalition no longer would be mathematically possible, in which case we will likely see a coalition between the CDU, SPD, and the Greens, or if the FDP does manage to make it in, we could see a coalition between the CDU, the SPD, and the FDP, the so-called Germany coalition, and that is something that Christian Lindner, the leader of the Free Democrats, has openly supported as of now, and so either of those is possible, but of course it's going to heavily rely on, which of the three minor parties, if all of them fail to get in, or if all of them manage to get in. That is going to have a huge impact on what kind of coalition is able to be formed after we get the results. And if we take a look at the polls, we can see how drastic the change has been, at least for some parties. Now, overall, the position of the parties has been the same since around middle of the summer of 2023. We have seen that the CDU was in first place, the AfD second, SPD third, and the Greens in fourth. So overall, that has not changed that much over the past year and a half. However, we can see that, of course, DLinke has recovered from pretty much polling below 5% for well over a few years to surging around the last month to around 7%. The BSV has dropped some, and we see some small changes. Of course, the AfD has managed to recover most of its support it lost before the EU election after a number of scandals it had faced, but it is not able to continue to surge. Is kind of plateaued around 20%, and the same with the CDU and the SPD. The SPD has not really been nosediving and lost any more support. They are kind of stable at around 15%, and of course the CDU is around 30%. There were some prospects that maybe the CDU-CSU would be able to surge to 32, 33, 34%. They did really well in certain state elections. However, Friedrich Merz as a candidate has not been that popular, and so for that reason, the CDU has kind of been capped at around 30%. But nonetheless, they will likely be able to form the next government. And of course, These are only polls. We could see polling misses. It has happened before in German politics. The polls are usually generally pretty accurate. In the 2021 election, they were, at least for every party, was kind of within 1 or 2 points of what it got in the polls. Now, of course, there's certain state elections that have had very, very bad polling misses. It's Saxony-Anhalt in 2021 and 2016, where we saw the AfD have do 6 points better or 6 points worse. And it is possible for something like that to happen. We could see a shadow AfD vote. We could see maybe more people vote for the SPD because it's the party of the chancellor. We could see maybe this surge for DLinke not actually materialize and them only getting 5%. Anything could happen. Of course, these are only polls, and we will of course have to wait for the actual results on Sunday. But according to these polls, this is what we're going to get: likely a CDU-led government with either the SPD or the Greens as coalition partner, and the AfD as a strong opposition, with DLinke managing to pull off a surprise comeback, and the BSV and FDP faltering and possibly not being able to be competitive in the future of German politics. So that's going to be it for this video, and of course, once we get the results on Sunday, I will do kind of a short overview of what the results are, and then in the days following, I will do a more deeper dive into certain demographics, look at the results across the country, and then of course on the Sunday after, we will have the elections in Hamburg, which are not as significant but will be of course still covered. So that's going to be it for this video. If you guys like the videos, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you for watching.